Welcome to the Recycle Podcast, where we discuss everyday issues from a mental health perspective. We are your hosts,
Dr. LaFonya Jones,
Dr. Rashonda Strickland,
and Dr. Nichelle Wall. Now, don't get it twisted. We're not going to be your stereotypical therapist.
What we will be is down to earth, informative, a little spicy, and vulnerable.
All right, interns, turn up the volume, grab your pen and paper. It's supervision time. As a reminder, this podcast is not meant to take the place of a relationship with a licensed mental health professional.
Welcome back to Session 11, The Tie That Binds.
Okay, interns. This week, we're going to be addressing the family members of addicts, which is, y'all, I have to tell y'all, this is a difficult subject because many family members are in denial about how the addiction is affecting them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I was working at a particular rehab, I was the family therapist there. And I would be so amazed at how many times I would have to make these phone calls to have the family member to participate. And they would say, well, I don't think I have a problem. I don't need to come, really. But then they would start talking and you could hear the anger. You could hear the hurt. You could hear the pain. And they would start crying.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you crying?
My thing is, even if you don't have a problem, how are you going to be able to help your family member if you don't have the tools?
Well, they don't feel like because it's not their disease, they don't have to work on it. But this disease is a family disease. And a lot of families don't realize that.
I agree.
And the reason this is a family disease is because of the psychological, physiological, and emotional pain that the family members have to also go through with the addict. It may not be affecting you directly because you're not ingesting a substance, but it is affecting you indirectly because you're having to watch it.
It's a trauma.
Yes.
You know, this is kind of like a throwback to our PTSD, even though we were talking about work specifically. But it is a throwback to that. There's a trauma that comes along with watching somebody that you love and have, care for disintegrate before your eyes.
Yeah.
And there's really, there's not much that you on a physical level can do to change it.
Yeah.
Most families have primary and secondary trauma. Because of this there are going to be certain things that they experience with addiction in the family, but also through the lens of the addict.
Yeah.
And people, who's ever prepared for that? Even us, if we had a new person in our family system, all of a sudden start using, we're not going to be prepared for that. And we got whole degrees in this.
Yeah.
Because it's a different level of intimacy when you're, like I always say, when you're doing life with people.
And it calls for a lot of confusion, for the family member, because a lot of times they have stopped using their voice. They've stopped addressing the concerns. And a lot of times I tell them to stop. Not to stop completely, but to stop while the addict is under the influence. Because what happens is when they try to address their concerns or whatnot while they're inebriated, they're not going to remember. And so I tell them, you're going to be frustrated, irritated, and confused because you have memories that they don't have.
And I think it goes back to what we were talking about in Lines in the Sand. You set your boundaries for you. It's not about the other person.
Yes, ma'am.
And you carry them out. It's your job to maintain them. And if you're arguing, because that's normally what happens, if you're arguing with this person because you want them to do right, that's not you maintaining your boundaries.
Yeah.
at all. It's actually you getting more
Sucked
swept
in.
up and into the problem. And it's hard. We're not going to say that it's easy. Like we talked about in the last session, we all have addicts recovering or not in our family system. So we definitely get it and have had firsthand experience with it.
Mm-hmm. In the last session, we talked about the Five Alive and the addict working a program. Well, the family members have to do the same thing. And now a lot of times the family members feel left out. One, because they don't seek the help, but they also don't know that there's help out there. So the addict goes to rehab. They get 7, 14, 21, 28, 30 days of treatment. And then the family member may get a weekend.
Yeah.
And there's no way they can learn the tools that will help them to help themselves in the future in just a weekend.
Yeah.
You know, or when I say weekend, I mean Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and maybe Monday.
Yeah, most people don't know that there are programs out there that you can have weekly sessions individually or group, whether you're teenage level or if you're a full-fledged adult. They typically don't do like young kids. That would have to be like a family session. But there are tons of programs out there because people in our industry know that this affects the family as a whole.
And statistics have shown that when family members get involved, there's a better chance, not, necessarily definitive, but a better chance for the addict to stay in recovery.
Support system.
Yeah, you have a support system, and then you learn how to, and I know this is kind of jumping and we kind of talked about it already, but you learn the difference between enabling and support.
Can you just stop there?
I was thinking that same thing. Can we please break that down?
Because I be irritated. I'm just going to be honest. Like, if any of my clients watch this and we talk about addiction on the inside, I be irritated. And it's not because I'm frustrated with you per se. It's because I don't want you to have to suffer through this, because I know how devastating this is to want what's best for somebody and they don't want it, and then you are so optimistic and you're just brokenhearted every day.
I was going to say get let down.
Yeah.
It's hard not to want more for someone than they want for themselves.
Yeah.
We've talked before about seeing the potential in people or seeing the memories when you look at them. I'm thinking about like parents when they look at their child that has addiction. The baby that I held in my arms and the expectations that I had of who you were going to be when you grow up, and then to see this is the life that you're leading, that it's hard to not want more for them than you even want for yourself.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing with that, the enabling and support, there's a thin line.
Yeah.
And family members tend to think that if I stop enabling you, you think that I don't love you.
Well, the reality is they're going to think that anyway.
They're going to think it
because they're not in their right state of mind, literally, like we talked about in the last session.
And it's a manipulation tactic.
Why would they want the person that does everything for them to go away?
Right.
Like most of the time, in my experience, when you have an addict, they are highly dependent on you, even though they act like they're not. You are providing everything for them.
Yeah. You provide, in some ways, shelter. You provide transportation. You provide money. You provide access. All kinds of things.
Yeah. And I tell the extreme versions of this, I tell them, you're essentially their drug dealer, because where are they getting their money from?
That is a fact.
Yeah.
That is because the thing is, one of the things that I tease my family members about, even, it can be a teaser or not, because it depends on the person. Addicts are the most addicts are the most smart people I have ever met.
Smartest.
Whatever. Either way, it can go either way. They know how to get their substance with lint in their pocket.
Oh yeah.
And that's why it's so hard for family members not to enable them and not to want to forgive them and, things like that, because they have a great personality. They are charismatic. Their demeanor is just awesome. And you just want to be around them, but until they're high. And it frustrates them because
why can't you be this way all the time?
Yeah.
Why do you have to be this way? Or why do you have to do this?
And they don't understand why they keep using a substance, even though it's causing friction in the dynamics of the house. And they want answers. And the truth, let the truth be told, they are receiving answers. They are telling them, oh, I can stop whenever I want to. Oh, you just don't understand why I keep using. Oh, girl, I ain't using that much.
Girl, those are some of the best self-lies I think I've ever heard.
It just makes you irritated.
I can stop whenever I want to. I mean, I've heard clients say that.
Yes.
I can stop whenever I want to.
Yes.
It's like, really? But you haven't yet, though.
And you don't want to.
Right. And that's the other excuse, or another excuse. I don't want to. No, you can't. And the thing is, family members don't realize they keep asking that question of why don't you stop, and they're actually receiving an answer.
They just it's not the one they want.
Right.
I was getting ready to say that is the problem with the question why. So when I'm working with my clients, not necessarily on substance abuse, but just in a more kind of codependent kind of way, we talk about the question why and how loaded of a question that is, and it's insatiable. So you ask them, well, why are you doing this? Or why are you treating me this way? Or why can't you do this? And then they give you an answer. And then here comes the next question. And then after they answer it, here comes the next question and the next question and the next question. And you just keep asking because you're not getting the answer that's in your head.
Because really the only answer that they want is that I'm going to stop, and they want to see them stop.
Ironically, and I know a lot of people who are family members of addicts are not going to want to hear this, but you don't accept them. That is the bottom line. You do not accept them. If you accepted them, you would handle them the way that they need to be handled. And that's on the good and the bad end of the spectrum. If this person is an addict, handle them as such. It doesn't mean that you love them any less, but it may mean, I'm not going to leave my purse around you, because you might take money in order to go, fund
your habit.
Or it may mean I'm not going to have arguments with you because you're going to get enraged, and then you're going to flip it and make it be about me when it's really about you. So you need to know the person you're dealing with.
True.
Most definitely. And the thing is, stop setting them up to lie.
Exactly.
Don't ask. You already know they high. You already know they drunk. They just walked into a wall that's been there for all their life.
Yeah. And stop negotiating.
Yes.
Well, if you do this like this, then I'll allow. No. They're going to do what they want to do.
No, I don't even know if that's negotiating. I think it's manipulation on both parts.
It is.
They're bargaining.
The addict, of course, is going to manipulate the family. But the family also tries to manipulate the addict.
Yep.
Well, if you love me,
you'll stop, when it has nothing to do with the love.
Yeah. And it's their body.
Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is, and I definitely, again, this is one of those moments where I wish I had a board for you all to see this visual, because one of the things that I put on the board for my family members and my addicts actually to see is the behaviors of an addict and the behaviors of the non-addict. Y'all probably seen that on my board before. And on that board, it has denial, manipulation, isolation, dishonesty, and guilt on both sides, because the non-addict begins to mimic the behaviors of the addict to survive.
Yeah.
And manipulation is exactly what y'all just described. I'm sorry, Dr.
No, you're okay. At the end of the day, the addict is going to win. They're the stronger of the two.
And oh gosh,
which is so
it sounds weird, but
it's sad to say.
It is.
And the reason, let's explain why they're the stronger one. Because one, they know how to manipulate you, because they know how to pull on your heartstrings to make you do what they want. And you're so worried as the family member of losing them, of losing their love, of losing
their life,
right, that you'll do it. You'll jump when you'll say how high when they say jump.
Yeah. But it's all on the addict is observant.
Most definitely.
You know, like you said, they're some of the smartest people because they watch. They, you know, they're looking for every little face twitch or, you know, I got you now. Which I know how long to badger you. I know how long to stay away from you and withdraw and neglect you.
And I know how and when to start an argument with you so I can blame you for me to go out of the house and drink or use.
That's why those boundaries got to be on point. I remember a few years back, I had a family member deep in an addiction, and y'all know the person because we've talked about it. But I got a phone call from another family member telling me that all hell was breaking loose and everything was going on. So I was like, okay, well, let me just go and drive back home, pop up, because it was serious. This person is passed out outside with somebody else, paraphernalia everywhere. The person that's not related to me wakes up and starts to try to charge me. And I was like, I need you to back up. I have a weapon. I need you to back up. But you know, when somebody is in a
altered state of mind,
yes,
there's no reasoning.
That addiction rage is on a whole other level, to the point where I had to pull my weapon against this person. And the other family member that had called me had to call the cops. Luckily, you know, that ended in success. But the person who called me was the enabler. Nothing changed probably for a whole other year. They kept going back and forth. And I understand the love that you have for somebody, because after that situation, and I drove back home to where I live currently, like I cried the whole way. Like it's sad to see it. That's not something that you want to encounter or to see anybody that you love go through on either side, the addict or the enabler.
Right. Well, and that's why I have to tell a lot of the enablers that you won't be able to start hard on setting your boundaries. No. So you can't, like, if it's your spouse, you can't say, okay, well, I don't want to say you can't say, you can say that if you want to, but if you know you can't follow through with the boundary, then don't use I'm gonna divorce you if you use again type of boundaries. It can be more subtle. You might need to start with baby steps of like no drugs or alcohol in the home or around me or the children. You know, that might need to be your starting point, because you're not saying you're divorcing them. You're not saying you're separating. You're just saying no drugs or alcohol around me and our children.
Yep. But people don't start setting boundaries until they've gotten to the ultimate boundary. You know, we had talked about ultimate limits before in a previous session. You know, the family members they wait until they're exhausted. Not when the person first starts using and they learn about it. They wait. Oftentimes it's years.
Yeah.
You know, they've just been browbeaten and you know, just broken down to the point to where now I'm ready to start setting some limits, and it becomes the ultimate limit.
Right.
And you got to set them boundaries early. If you really think about it in terms of like your health and what you can take, set the boundary early so that you can work through it instead of like fighting against the addict.
Yeah.
Because you'll be able to last longer, because it's like, okay, I set this small boundary. I'm working through my emotional baggage, and I'm holding firm, even though I break down every time the person leaves. I can do this. Then you set a more firm boundary, and you set a more firm boundary, and eventually you get to a point where either that person is going to have to make a change to remain in your life, or you're going to have to remove them.
And then by the time you get to that point, you'll be ready.
Yep.
Yeah.
You didn't just start there, because I'm going to tell you, if you try to start there and you don't follow through, I promise you've lost. The addict got you now, because they know that you're not gonna follow through. That's the thing. The only thing they need to know is that you're not gonna follow through with your boundary, and they got you.
Well, again, goes back to what we were saying a minute ago. They're observant, so they know exactly how far and how long they need to do whatever it is that they typically do before you reach your breaking point. Because sometimes I would even venture to say the non-addict doesn't even know what their breaking point is.
Oh yeah, most
you know,
definitely.
until it's way deep off in. You know, they just think that they're, in their mind, they believe they're setting a boundary, because we do a lot of verbal boundaries. We don't do a lot of like enforcing boundaries. We say a lot of, I don't like the way you're doing this, or why do you do this, or stop doing this, or you can't do this. But then again, it's not enforced in any kind of way. So you have zero credibility.
Yeah.
So 2 things with that. One of the reasons why it's difficult is because they don't realize that the addict depends on them more than what they think.
Yep.
Because the addict has now manipulated them to think that they can't live without them, that the family member can't live without the addict.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is the family member, because they're, let's just use adults. I don't want to do children and because that's a whole different thing. But you have 2 adults, a spousal relationship. The one addict thinks, the non-addict thinks that they don't have any leverage. Like, well, what I'm gonna do? What kind of boundary can I set? He grown, I'm grown. You're like, what can I say? So they don't know that they have leverage.
Yeah.
Because they're thinking the extreme.
Mm-hmm.
And
well, it goes back to when we talked about, I can't remember the session, but I believe it was Lines in the Sand.
Boundaries?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where you are your own gatekeeper. You know, you control the access to you. You know, you are the person that gets to say what is and is not okay. You know, like you were saying a little bit earlier, Dr. Wall, that you control all of that. But you have to believe that you can control it. It's one thing to know something in your mind. It's another something to believe it in your mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And enforce it.
Yes.
So if y'all don't mind, I'm going to just give a few boundaries so that they,
Okay.
you know, just in case someone listens. Well, we have a lot of people listening. So
like and subscribe.
Right. So one of them is like what I just said, no drugs or alcohol in the home or around me or our children. Another one could be no drug using friends or alcoholics in the home around me or our children. Another one could be I will not pay, I will not bail you out of jail or pay for an attorney.
We had to do that in my family.
Yeah.
Yep. There you see.
And I'm not coming to see you because I'd be too heartbroken.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
And then another one is I will not wake you up and leave home to pick you up from a bar.
That's a good one.
I wouldn't have thought about that
Look
one.
at you out in your field.
I know, because I was like, I wouldn't have thought about that one. All right, Dr. Jones.
Appreciate y'all. And the reason why I like this I will not wake up one or wake you up one is because a lot of, and I'm going to just say women, because women are usually the ones that are stay-at-home moms and wives. A lot of times women feel obligated to wake their husbands up to go to work because they're stay-at-home moms. And so what I have to tell a lot of my women who are spouses of an addict, you need to go get a job. You need to go either get some sort of vocational training and get a job, because if you are continuing to rely on an addict for financial stability, you're going to stay anxious. And I hope that doesn't sound crude or rude. I'm giving you the reality of it.
But it makes sense.
Even if he does stay in recovery for a year, the thing is, an addict can relapse.
If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to make a podcast. Let me explain. It's free. There's certain tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. You can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's ANCHOR.FM.
In any moment, and you don't want to put your stability, I don't care if you have children or not, it doesn't matter. You don't want to put your stability in the hands of an addict. I'm sorry. That just,
You should just always be able to be independent not
self-sufficient.
self-sufficient. It's not me saying that you don't need whoever your partner is, because that's not me at all. But it's to say that there's a difference between needing somebody and wanting somebody. What value are y'all adding to each other's life? And when you are in the throes of an addiction situation, it is very difficult to find any positivity in it. And if you don't already have yourself together, that's another hurdle that you have to cross.
and you feel stuck.
Yep.
And you feel like you can't set boundaries because you don't make the money.
Yep.
Right.
So then you don't feel like you have any leverage.
Mm-hmm.
And so then y'all come and see me. But then what am I supposed to do other than teach you this?
Right.
You know?
You know, and like you were saying, an addict can relapse at any moment. You know, I know someone that has been sober for 30 some odd years, and she still, even today, talks about how it's still a struggle. And she's been sober, I think, probably almost as long as I've been alive.
Wow.
You know, but she talks about it's still a struggle for her today, that, you know, she doesn't go out to bars. She doesn't, you know, she's gotten much better. Like if her husband's having a drink, being able to, okay, I don't need to have one. But in a social gathering where there's a whole bunch of people, you know, having alcohol, she tends to not, you know, attend those types of events.
Yeah. And I will say for family members, we talked about the addicts working a program. Be okay with them working a program, because a lot of times spouses become jealous of the fact that they have a sponsor, because their sponsor is supposed to be same gender, but still they have a problem with them talking to their sponsors and going to meetings, because they feel like they're left out. The family members feels like they're left out and not being included in, you know, what's going on with them. But the thing is, what you want is an addict to be able to share with no filters what is going on with them. And they can't necessarily do that with you, because if they just say, for instance, they just get out of rehab and they come and tell you that they're having thoughts or that they're having cravings, you're going to automatically go to, see, I knew this rehab wasn't going to work. You getting ready to relapse. And that's too much pressure.
Need that.
And for the person who is wanting to stay in recovery and be healthy, that's one of the number one reasons why they relapse: home life. That is one of the number one, because they went away and made changes, but the family unit didn't.
Exactly. Which is another reason why family members need to get the help for themselves.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, I used to do this demonstration in my group and the family members used to laugh because they couldn't do nothing but admit to themselves that that's what they do. So what happens, what I used to do is I would have one of the addicts to stand up, because we had one of the groups that included the family members and the addict. I would have the addict stand up and I would have them walk around the room and I would follow them. And I would start berating them. Like, I thought you was going to a meeting. I thought it ended at 7:00. How come it's 7:15 and you just not getting home? How come it's 8:00 and you just not getting home? Who did you go drink coffee with? What did y'all talk about? Why you got to always talk to your sponsor? And you could see the face of the addict get so intense. You know, they could turn red. They got tense. You saw them getting frustrated, and they would turn around and be like, Dr. Jones, like, that's exactly how I feel. And so the family members got to hear that if you're doing that, that's causing stress. I'm not saying that that's a reason for them to blame you, but it's causing stress.
Yeah. You know, when you were saying like the family gets jealous, you know, because the addict is getting so much, but the services are meant to wrap around the addict. You know, everything, as far as mental health is concerned, everything is geared towards helping the identified person achieve their goal.
Yeah.
So they get everything. They get the psychiatrist, and they get, you know, like you said, the therapist, and then they get the family therapy, and then they get group, and then they get aftercare services. It's all built to wrap around them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that lack of wraparound for the family, of course, is going to leave them feeling abandoned
And helpless. Yeah. Which is, again, why Dr. Wall said earlier, there's a lot of help out there for family members. But I'm going to say this, and I'm not meaning this in a negative way. Al-Anon is not the only source of help.
Yeah.
It is a source, and please do attend, because you definitely need your Al-Anon group just like they need their AA or 12-step group. But there are other services too that you need, that is out there that you can receive to at least get you started. So if your loved one who is the identified patient goes to treatment and the family counselor calls you, even if it is just a weekend type of thing, or maybe 4 or 5 days of it, at least it gets you started. And hopefully because what I used to do is I used to create a continuing care plan for my family members, just to make sure they knew what was available in the community for them.
It's necessary.
Absolutely. Well, they know, like all of us actually have said, the family also needs to feel that they are being supported, because that's where the addict is returning to. And, like you were saying, home life is one of the biggest, reasons for relapse. The family needs to know how to handle the changes in that person. We've talked before about homeostasis. As one person starts to change, it's going to force change in somebody else. And that force can either be towards the healthy end or it can be towards the unhealthy end. But somebody's going to change somebody.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And hopefully the change can be balanced, because as you get that push to, start working on yourself, you learn how to communicate your needs, your wants, and your desires. And that's very important for you to become more vocal, because at the point where I'm assuming the addict has gone to rehab, you have probably been tricked into not talking, not communicating, being dishonest. Like I said, that mirror, being dishonest, being in denial, isolating. So you don't have any support, because you don't even tell your family probably the truth.
Just lying. To save face. You trying to... I have I have 2 individuals going through something similar to that right now in therapy. So it's unfolding exactly how we're describing. And unfortunately, I have to just sit back, be part of the person's support that is willing to listen until they hit their rock bottom. Because the same way addicts hit their rock bottoms, enablers and family members hit their rock bottom as well. And rock bottom for the family is the place where you can no longer take them crossing your boundaries anymore.
But then now it comes out in anger.
Or brokenness.
Which still looks like anger.
Yeah.
And the thing is, the worst place for a family member to be and try to communicate those emotions is in anger. So what I typically try to do is get my family members to go backward to identify what the primary emotions, and because I tell them, I believe you. I believe you're angry now. Well, honestly, I take it higher than that. I put pissed off,
rage.
So I believe that anger is there. But where did it start? And because that's where we can start the healing, because we can identify the primary emotion, which is the emotions that's under the anger. And we can begin to deal with, like, well, when did you start noticing that you were hurt? When did you start noticing that this person was acting, I'll say, erratic behavior?
Reverse engineer.
Yeah.
Right.
I talk with my clients when we do speak about secondary kind of, anger being a secondary emotion. And we talk about trying to identify the more accurate version. And I usually do this with couples, but it makes sense for, addiction as well, is that if you don't identify and tell the person that has hurt you what the real feeling is, they're only going to address anger, which is going to make you even more angry, because that's not the real feeling that you're feeling.
Yeah.
If you're feeling disappointment, or you're feeling rejection, or you're feeling abandonment that has morphed over time into anger, and they keep saying, well, I apologize for this, or I did this, and they keep trying to hit the angry feeling, it's just going to bubble over into this even bigger issue, because you got all these other emotions that are still just sitting there being unaddressed.
Right. And being passive anger is not healthy either.
No.
Effective communication is required.
Yes. Yes. Because I've noticed that the passive anger and aggressive anger is definitely, when I say aggressive, meaning verbally attacking, sometimes physically attacking, depending on that rage. But those are two areas where I have seen and heard a lot of family members operate in. And both of those are manipulation as well.
Yeah, because you're not getting your way, so you're acting out, and instead of making a different choice. And that's why I said earlier, the addict is the stronger of the two people.
Yeah.
Because they have transferred all that to you, and now you got to deal with it. They out here living their best life still, chilling.
And you have to think about the things that they've learned, especially if they're an addict that is in a circle of other people with addiction.
Yeah.
The things that they've learned from other addicts on how to maneuver and move. Whereas you, the family, you are likely not speaking to other people that have family members that have addiction, because addiction is a very secretive thing.
Yeah.
And remember, you've been trained not to either, because anytime you did try to talk to someone about it, the addict was like, don't be telling nobody my business. Why you got to go out there and so now that was them setting their boundary, and you respected it.
Yep.
But the reality is that's your business too.
Exactly.
So, not that we need to fully touch on this, but I also wanted us to talk about adult children of addicts.
Yeah.
Because
I see a lot of those.
we all have experience with that.
Yeah. Lots of clients.
Yeah. Okay. I'm trying to think of where to start with that. Well, a lot of the adult children of addicts that I have, they tend to have, so it's a lot of different symptoms you can have, but they tend to have some of the same few
main ones.
One of them is being loyal when when a situation or person or whatever does not deserve it, but they remain loyal. And part of that is because for some, and this is just one area, there's a lot of them. For some, they became the fixer in their family when they were children because of the addiction.
Yep.
And so because they became the fixer, they have now taken on this idea of being able to fix everybody, being nurturing, and being a people pleaser.
They become the rescuer.
Yes.
Bad boundaries.
And then some, and by the time I see them, some of them probably have recognized this one, that they lie for no reason.
Lying when the truth will do.
Yep.
Well, you've had to lie for the addict.
There you go. You've either had...
They're not drunk, or, fixing them up, wiping their face, cleaning them up. Or, like you said, waking them up for work.
Or they don't want to get in trouble either.
That too.
Oh, yeah. And they are not sure of what to expect. And the other thing that I found, and this is not necessarily a symptom, but the other thing that I found too is that they are typically upset with the other parent, not the addict.
The non-addict.
Yes.
I agree with that.
And
you could have done more.
You could have done more. Why didn't you leave?
What about me?
I was just thinking that. Why didn't you protect me?
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not until I have to point those things out of why they're upset with the non-addict
Mm-hmm.
and why they've transferred. Why are they rescuing the addict?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that triangle: the victim, the rescuer, and the prosecutor.
Mm-hmm.
And they have now, obviously because they're an adult, they have now inserted themselves in that triangle.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them can't, well, I don't want to say they can't, they don't recognize it because they've been doing it since they were children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then that ends up bleeding over into their relationships because you're just perpetuating the cycle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's, well, partially like we've talked about before, you try to work out your demons in your relationships.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you try to fix the addict or the history that you've had in the addict with the addict in your romantic relationship.
Yep.
And then problems get caused there because that's not the person that can fix it, or that's not the person that you know can actually address whatever it is that you're feeling.
Yeah. When I have people, and this is not just for adult children of addicts, but anybody who has stuck moments, which we all do technically, from childhood and adolescence, I have them do this exercise where the person that I'm currently counseling, their adult self, writes a letter to their child self.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably one of the hardest things that they have to do because you have to go back to what you felt as that kid and support them and build them up and have forgiveness and all those sorts of things. And once we like process that letter, go through that letter, I then have the kid write a letter to the adult.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And
I haven't done that half.
yeah, it's very cathartic, but it normally takes my
time.
clients
Yeah.
about 3 months or
I was
something
like
like that, because they'd be like, "Nah, I'm good.
Right.
I don't want to do that."
And they don't write the letter.
Well, I'm like, "Well, you really don't have a choice right now. We going through therapy. What are you talking about?" So we just gonna look at each other. I'll look at you.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be an expensive look.
And see, I do a timeline. And because a lot of them can't see why they do act the way, like a lot of them don't know what normal behavior is.
Mm-hmm.
They grew up in dysfunction.
Uh-huh. And so I have to go back, like I tell them to start with their first memory, not at 5, at their first memory, if they have any before 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then we begin to talk about their life.
Yep.
And okay, see, that's why you don't communicate right here, because you couldn't communicate, so we point those things out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's a process, y'all. It is layered. It's an onion.
Yeah.
Oh, seriously.
Yeah. And just for you all, some that may want to know some more symptoms of an adult child of an alcoholic,
That's a mouthful.
yes. One of them is they have a difficult time having fun.
Yep. Because they're serious all the time.
They had to be. They had to grow up. They
Survival mode.
They were little adults.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know if y'all remember this. Maybe it was in the first session where I talked about you have 3 levels of living: surviving,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was just thinking that.
thriving, living and thriving. So yeah, that they stay in surviving until they are aware that that's not how you should be living.
Mm-hmm.
And they judge themselves without mercy. That's
Ooh.
kind of goes in with what you just said.
Yeah.
They take themselves very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
They, of course, they had to. They again were little adults.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And we just talked about this one. They constantly seek approval and affirmation.
Yes. Which is how they get into them bad
There
relationships.
you go.
Oh my gosh.
Just
I
be
like-
all
I know. I have
enmeshed.
like 3 clients in my head right now. Just like, oh my God. It's like, let me help you.
Yeah, I think we all probably got that and more, because
Yeah.
addiction is widespread, even though people don't really feel like it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And the thing is, sometimes parents tend to think that their children aren't being affected by the addiction that's in the house because they're younger.
Or they don't see
Or
the
they don't
use.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the one thing that I can definitely say about children is they are observant.
Mm-hmm.
They can tell what kind of mood is about to be in the house
Yes.
by the way you put the key in the door.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I think people forget
they're sponges.
they're sponges, and kids are technically how we should be throughout our life. But it's before all the bad stuff happens and we have up all these walls and we're not functioning correctly. Children are the way we are supposed to look at the world. So a common saying that I always heard was, kids are great observers and poor interpreters.
Mm-hmm.
So they observe everything, but
Oh,
the
yeah.
understanding is not there. And they're like, well, I just need to help, because that's what you would do as a kid. If you see somebody hurting or something wrong, you're like, let me go help. Unless, you got some issues. Maybe you got reactive attachment disorder or something that then you probably gonna hurt somebody. But that's another
Or
episode.
not be interested.
Yes. So, I think that is one of the struggles when you are trying to overcome being that little kid in your adult life, is that you're still stuck there.
Yeah.
And you still think it happened the way you observed it, but it really isn't.
Go ahead.
So something, I don't know if it was going to be in your list or not, but, and again, this is not something I've ever really specifically talked about with addiction, but it does fit, is being emotionally stunted and stuck at a
yes.
certain age. So, in my mind, growing up with, a parent that has an addiction issue, until you can get older and get some, therapy and work through some of these issues, you can be emotionally stuck at a certain age.
Yes.
You process emotionally like a child, or you process emotionally like a teenager, very impulsive, self-centered, things like that. But until you start to really work on yourself, you will stay living and viewing the world through those eyes.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Lord. I had a client pop in my head just now. Yes, Jesus.
I've had a couple of them. It's like, look, you're basically a perpetual 15-year-old.
Yeah.
Because, this particular client, their parent, committed suicide, but they did have addiction problems.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, you're a perpetual 15-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
You grew in body.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you get to say that you're an adult because you have the age of an adult. But however, the way you view the world and the way you move in this world is very childlike.
Yeah. Chronological and maturity are two different things.
Yeah.
I often have to say, do you realize you're no longer in that war zone? Like, do you realize that's not where you are anymore? You don't have to live like that. It's time to grow up. It's time to mature. It's time to figure out what you want. And a lot of times they have no idea what they want because they have been in protector mode or survival mode or whatever.
And they don't know what normal is.
No.
So they don't if you don't know what normal is,
Or healthy.
or right. Oh, no, just give me a second. Or what healthy is, you won't, how can you strive for that?
Yeah.
Okay. You have
You
to
wouldn't
have
even know what you're looking for.
Yeah, you have to
Exactly.
have some outside perspective. You have to have somebody that has shown or told you that it can be a different way.
Yeah. Mentorship can be a beautiful thing if you can find somebody, that's much healthier. Because I live under the idea that we all got a little bit of something. But if if you can find somebody that's a healthier version, mentorship can be a wonderful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, intern. So, if you or a family member is struggling with addiction or any type of substance abuse, please reach out to your local mental health professional. You can use resources like Psychology Today, or Google is always going to be your friend. You can, do a simple Google search for mental health providers in my area, or substance abuse providers in my area, and find somebody that can assist you, in that journey.
Must be this volume control.
So, okay, interns, process your notes. Be sure to catch us next session and find us on all major platforms at The Recycled Podcast.
If you're a new intern, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and share.
Thanks for listening. And remember, we are shifting and reshaping our psyche through healing conversations and connections, one discussion at a time.